Thank you so much for being on the show, Dr. Plucker.
Of course, of course. I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Great. So let's just jump right into it and let's start with the hard truth. We parents and also teachers in school assume that the brighter students will naturally rise to the top. And I understand from what you have written about and from your research that this is a dangerous myth. Can you talk a little bit about how we're overlooking these brilliant students and how can we help them find this hidden talent?
Yeah, I always find it interesting that academics is the
Mhm.
one area where you hear this argument. We don't hear it in athletics and sports. We don't hear it in the arts. We don't hear it in business. You just never run into the stereotype of people who are talented will just take care of themselves. We would
Mhm.
never do that in sports, for example, right? Like if you said that in sports to most coaches, they would just look at you like, what? But we do it within education all the time. I have to say, we see this attitude in lots of countries. It's not just a US issue, but I think it's especially pronounced here. Some people call it sort of an anti-excellence bias. I think that's probably a little bit too strong. I don't think it's a bias so much as it is a neglect. Just the idea of what teaching and learning is so hard, it's so difficult. So we're going to focus on students who need extra support to say get up to grade level. We're just going to focus on sort of student deficits in general with every student and make sure we're remediating all of those deficits. Well, every single student has some type of talent.
Yeah.
And as everybody knows,
Mhm.
many students have tremendous talent. Why would we not help those students develop those talents further? Why would we keep holding them back? As one of my colleagues, Del Siegley, likes to say, every student should have the opportunity to learn something new every day that they're in school. If you don't agree with that, I'd have to ask you, okay, then why are some of these students even coming to school? If they already know everything that's going to be taught, why are we wasting their time then? Right.
Mhm.
So that's sort of the stereotype that we have been fighting against for decades, which is that bright students need to be challenged, just like every student needs to be challenged.
Mhm.
And if we don't do that, it's bad for the student, it's bad for their family. The student gets very bored very quickly. And then it's bad for all of us to
Yeah.
have this talent that's not contributing to the economy, the culture, our local communities. So that's sort of the big picture of why I think this is so important.
It's like we are trying to measure how far a child can walk rather than how high or how can a child fly. You're kind of restricting that growth in the child. Moving on to systemic solutions, you have been a major advocate for universal screening, right? And also for flexible grouping. Now, until I started Googling and trying to find you online and trying to read about your work, I had no idea about this. And I know there are millions of parents like me who don't know anything about it. Can you, in very simple terms, tell us a little bit about this term universal screening and flexible grouping and how it can help us?
Yeah, let me take a half step back from that though, and just sort of paint a picture of how many students we're actually talking about. In many states, in many countries, if there are advanced opportunities, it is a very limited group of students who gets access to those opportunities. In some American states, we're talking 1 to 2% of students. Clearly, we have more than 1 or 2% of students who would benefit from some form of advanced learning. My colleagues and I estimate that it's probably closer to 15 to 25. You may have 1 to 2% who are extremely in need of very advanced education. But students who would benefit from everything sort of above the norm is a much bigger percentage of students than people think. I would say there are millions of those students. Many of them are not really getting much advanced education. So we know these students are out there. And
Mhm.
yet, if schools have programs, they often identify students who can participate using what I would consider to be pretty archaic methods, teacher nominations, mostly things dealing with nominations. So it's a very small group of students who pass through this very subjective screen to even be considered. What we've learned over the past 10 to 15 years is that if you look at data on every single student,
Mhm.
you always find large groups of students who are excelling that you would have missed. And in fact, when I go into, say, a small town school, rural schools, very urban schools, schools in poorer neighborhoods, I will often have educators tell me, we don't really have that many talented students here. And the first thing I say is, let's look at your data on every single student. And I can guarantee you that you're missing large numbers of those students. And every time we find large numbers of those students. So that's sort of the principle behind universal screening,
Okay.
which is if you're going to have advanced opportunities, you really need to be as inclusive as possible and be as careful as possible to make sure that any student who would really benefit from it would actually receive those opportunities. So that's what universal screening is. It literally means look at everybody if you're going to select students for advanced opportunities. As common sense as that sounds, that's just not how we've done it here for long stretches. More and more, we're seeing school districts and states move in the direction of universal screening. To me personally, there's no downside to it whatsoever. It doesn't need to be expensive, and it is much fairer to students in general. So that's the universal screening part. You also asked about flexible grouping, correct? People call this lots of different things. They call it ability grouping. They call it tracking. My colleagues and I are starting to prefer flexible readiness grouping. It takes the pressure off to figure out what a student's natural ability is, but we know how ready they are for something. And so we could universally screen, see who seems to be showing signs that they're ready for, say, advanced math, advanced science, advanced reading and writing, and then finding ways to do that. Now, again, a half step back. There are many more students ready for advanced learning than conventional wisdom would normally have people think. The spread of readiness within a classroom that doesn't have flexible grouping can be tremendous. In most studies, it's pretty much at least 5 different grade levels of student readiness. So that would be, say, a 3rd grade classroom that has students working at the kindergarten level and students working at the 4th, 5th, or 6th grade level. Some studies have found classrooms that have like 9 to 10 grade levels of student readiness in them. That is just a huge, huge spread. Mm-hmm. Asking any one teacher, no matter how talented they are, to meet the needs of that many students. Again, it's just common sense, right? It's so hard. Mm-hmm. And so we're big fans of flexible readiness grouping, is, having students move around so that they're with peers who are learning at the same level. Those sorts of things we think are the foundation of advanced learning. And at least within the US, we see flexible grouping sort of peak in popularity, and then there's a backlash against it, and then it peaks, and then there's a backlash. There's lots of controversy about how well it works. My attitude is we know that the alternative doesn't work.
Does not work.
Yeah. Right. So let's try something. And if it works, great. If it doesn't work, students are no worse off than they were before. So my general attitude is that we should be trying flexible grouping whenever we possibly can.
You've talked about equity and excellence are not enemies. I love that. But at the same time, I mean, in Maryland, especially, I have a kid going to elementary school. I see that the teachers have done flexible grouping. There are different reading groups. There is a GT program, that is the gifted and talented program. Before a child is put into a GT program, and my child is not there yet, she's still in 1st grade. But there is a screening test. I think it's called the COGAT or something. Would you consider that as a universal screening? Because that's given to everybody in the class, right? So they're already doing that.
Yeah, I mean, any data point that you can use that would provide you evidence about whether a student is ready for some sort of advance, like, as we put it colloquially, that they need more, whatever more may be. And the COGAT is a very good assessment. If they're truly giving it to everyone, then it would be a really good universal screen.
I think so. I mean, I've not reached there yet, but from what I've heard is that if you're getting at least a 90% above in your MAP scores, the chances of you to take the COGAT are higher, and then the chances of you getting into GT program are pretty good as well. So, in these schools in the Maryland area, I know most of them have these universal testing screenings. However, in certain states, if a school is hesitant to implement it, what is that argument a parent can take to the principal or to the school board saying that, like, my child needs this, like, we have to implement it?
That's a really good question. I would say
And
part of my argument
are public schools bound to, by law? Do they have to do it?
in some states, I don't know, in off the top of my head, I can't remember whether Maryland is mandatory universal screening. Only a handful of states mandate it. Many recommend it. I guess the thing that I would say to parents is part of the argument has to be there's really no downside to doing it. We actually collect universal data on students all the time. We're just not used to using it for this purpose. Ideally, yes, you'd give something like the COGAT to every single student or one of the Naglieri tests to every single student, but it doesn't need to be an expensive add-on.
Mm-hmm.
You can use data that you already have, if
Mm-hmm.
nothing else, to help mediate the cost a little bit. And then the upside, though, is tremendous in that universal screening will unquestionably find students who are already working at advanced levels. So this isn't students who have the potential to do it. These are students who are already doing it and they're just being missed. And they can be missed for lots of different reasons. Bias, luck, who knows? Lots of different reasons why students get overlooked who have real talents. So just universal screening alone is
Not
a
enough.
big opportunity driver. And so if the school district is about providing opportunity and really emphasizing excellence, then universal screening really is a fantastic way to do it. It also tends to identify many more talented low-income students than non-universal screening, significantly more. In some studies, it's 3 to 4 times as many of those students. And again, these aren't students who have the potential. They're students who are already achieving at high levels, and we've just been missing them. So it is, to me, a great intervention, a great strategy that does promote excellence and equity at the same time. Like, they don't have to be mutually exclusive.
So, just to roll back a little bit, would COGAT qualify as a universal screening test?
If you're giving it to everybody, yes.
Okay. Now, I'm sure you said there's bias. Someone could be having a bad test day because teachers would only pick up the very like bright students who are getting 90s and A's in class to maybe give the COGAT test, right? They qualify for that. From what I'm understanding, you're saying that if a test like COGAT is given to the whole class, we may be able to identify some hidden talent that probably got missed in the class tests, or because some kids are not very attentive in class tests. I see that with my own daughter, but in her other tests, like the big ones, she's doing really well. Is that what you're hinting at?
Yeah, exactly. There are a million reasons why a student, even a student who's high achieving, just doesn't end up on people's radar screens when you're talking about gifted ed, acceleration, etc. And universal screening makes that process much more objective. And we know that it finds a lot of these students. They're kind of hidden in plain sight, if you will. Giving the COGAT to every single student, it's not perfect, but you're going to find some of those students who are sitting right there.
Yeah. You know, my perception about gifted and talented has totally changed since my daughter started school. I believe that you should not segregate kids into different groups, put some into gifted and talent and some in a different class, because the kids who are not in the gifted and talented would probably not feel good about themselves if they knew that they've not been selected. And I, at some point, had felt that it should all be equal. But now that my daughter is in school and I'm seeing her do really well in certain subjects, I feel like she needs to be challenged. But then again, and I think about it from the other perspective, that what if I had a child who was not doing well and she was put in the other class? What do you have to do for those kids? Like, how do you build their self-esteem and make them feel like, hey, just because you're not in that class doesn't mean you're not gifted? I feel the word gifted and talented should be changed to like maybe accelerated or something. What do you think about that?
I don't like the G word. I think it's just an old term, right? Like,
Yeah.
we're allowed to change our terms. And it also, not to get professory on you, but labeling a student as gifted sends the wrong message to me, right? It's like, here's the special child. They may be special, right? Sure, absolutely. But it places so much of the responsibility on the student, which is why I think we get stereotypes like those students can take care of themselves. If we're talking about advanced students, if we're talking about accelerated students, to me, that's a much broader term. An advanced student,
what is the difference?
to me, it changes the emphasis from finding the special child to creating opportunities where we can see students excel. It takes the responsibility off the child and puts it more on us as educators and parents, community members, that like we need to be creating opportunities so that as many students as possible can become advanced. It's not an exclusive club. We know that now. But I mean, I would also say to the parent, and I'm doing interviews with parents and community members and educators and students themselves all the time. And when we go into school districts, I will have people say, like, I just don't think it's fair that there's this special program. And then I say, okay, but can you agree that the fourth grader who is ready for algebra, and those students are out there, that means they're 3 to 4 or maybe even more grade levels ahead. Should they not have that need met? And almost immediately, every single person goes, well, no, of course, that would be ridiculous. And it's like, okay, but that's what's happening. Right. And so how do we create more inclusive programs? I think it starts with fixing our terms. That's why we use readiness grouping. That's why we talk about advanced or accelerated students and not gifted students.
Still using the public schools, at least in the Maryland area, still using the word gifted and talented.
Yeah, I know lots of those program coordinators. In some areas, we've been able to convince them to change terms, and others, they really like the term. I don't think it's helpful personally, just like I don't think having services for only 3 or 4% of your students is very, very helpful.
Yeah.
You can't tell me in many of these Maryland county-based school districts that you don't have at least 15 to 20% of students who would thrive if they received more advanced instruction. That can look very different to different students. Sort of being much more inclusive. And here's another reason, Rashanka, why I think being more inclusive matters. We don't have many false positives. So if you're trying to identify students who need more advanced education, it is very rare that you find a student who seems, all the data tells you, all of the teacher parent experiences tell you, this student is ready for more. Very rarely is that incorrect, right? There are very few false positives.
Yeah.
The problem is the false negatives, where people say, well, I'm just not sure about this student. And traditionally, with these very exclusive programs, that student does not get any opportunity at doing advanced work.
Yeah.
My argument is, if there's even a question, try it, right? Maybe it works out. That's how we control for these false negatives. And quite frankly, I got this idea talking to my medical doctor friends, and we were sort of debating it. And they were like, we do that in medicine all the time.
All the time. You have to. You take risk.
Right. Like, so if you come in and we're not 100% sure, and we have a treatment, some medicine that has very few side effects and may solve the problem, we're going to give that to you as both a treatment, but also as a diagnostic tool. Yeah. If it works, great. Yay. Yeah. If it doesn't, we have better information now, right? And I really love that example, because in schools, we tend to treat these students like they're special snowflakes. They can't handle any, rejection. They can't handle any sort of struggle. That's just ridiculous. Kids are very resilient.
Yes.
If you think accelerated math may be of benefit to a child, but you're just not sure, I have an easy solution to that.
Go for it.
Try it.
Yeah.
If it works, you look like a genius. If it doesn't, tinker with it a little bit. If it still doesn't work, okay, now you know for sure. It's not a false negative anymore, potentially, right? And so I think just being more inclusive and being willing to give kids chances, give them the opportunity. To us, it's a small logistical issue. It could literally change that student's life. And can I give you one very real world example of this?
Yeah, please.
So my colleague, Steve Fredericks, and I started sort of a pilot advanced math and STEM program. New York City, the North Bronx, just a very impoverished community. And we did an after school program. And we did universal screening. We found all these students who had all these talents that people were just overlooking. We did it in an after school setting again, so we didn't have to worry about the normal curriculum. And it was just a lot of sort of project-based learning to deal with STEM, but then also sort of computer adaptive instruction so that they could go through the math curriculum at their
Mhm.
own pace. It worked great. But the most important part, we had 2 students come to us about a
Mhm.
couple weeks after we started who said, our friends are doing that. We think we'd be really good at that too. And I have to admit, I hesitated. I was the only person. And I was like, oh, we did universal screening. We talked to, parents, caregivers, teachers, the principal. Like, I'm pretty sure we got everyone who would actually benefit from it. I was 100% wrong. That's why universal screening is so important
Important.
and why this inclusive mindset is so important. All of my colleagues, Steve especially, said, hey, let's give them a shot. We have the space. One of the students tried it for a couple weeks and said, nah,
Not for me.
it's just not for me. And we
Yeah.
were like, okay, great. Go back to what you were doing. Absolutely no harm, no foul. The
Mhm.
other student was the best student in the program for the
Wow.
life of the program. Like, we had just missed
It's like
the
hidden
most
talent.
talented student. It's all of these measures, all of these strategies, even though they're better, they're still not perfect.
Mhm.
So this student essentially identified himself, came in, and he came in late. And I think our rough estimate is he went through about 3 grade levels of math content in about 2.5 months. That's a very talented
Wow.
child
Wow.
who, for whatever reason, test scores and everything, he just didn't pop up. He wasn't on people's radar screens. Think about the opportunity that we created for that child
Wow.
just by Steve convincing me we needed to be a bit more inclusive. He was 100% right on that. That has really colored all of my attitude toward this, which is,
Wow.
and I was in a school district recently, and they sent me an email from a parent, and the parent was very carefully, it was a very long email, very carefully laying out why their student should still get access to a specific advanced opportunity, even though in their universal screener, the student had missed by like a couple points.
Mhm.
And the district asked me for a reaction. And my reaction, I was a little bit sassy about it, but I basically said, if you're fighting about 1 or 2 points, like, you've already lost this argument, right? Like, that's
Mhm.
just silly to most people. If the
Mhm.
child is that close, let's just try it. You have the space in the program. Let's just try it and see. They could end up being incredibly responsive to this intervention, or they're not. And now everybody knows, and everything's fine. The kids will forget about it if it doesn't work, like, the next day. It's
But
only
they
the
will not.
adults.
Yes.
It's only the adults who have it in the back of their head. This is an adult issue. It's not the kid issue.
Yeah.
So yeah,
But I
be
think
flexible. Be flexible.
I think sometimes parents do need to push their child and make them believe that they can do better, right? Because otherwise, children will just feel like they're average. It's okay to be average. You're happy at school, and that's enough, right? Sometimes, like having that grit, going through some adversity, struggling a little bit pushes you beyond your comfort zone, and some great results come out of that.
I mean, absolutely. In part because of these, right? The phones. Students have so many distractions now.
Hmm.
It is so easy. It's super easy for all of us, right? But especially for children to sort of fall into this technology trap.
Hmm.
These are incredibly useful devices where we are using technology to do this so we don't have to be in the studio together, right? Like, technology is a huge productivity driver. AI is only going to increase that, but
Yeah.
it's also a black hole for children's attention. And
Yeah.
it's so distracting, and it can destroy productivity. It's not like the old days where if I was bored growing up and I complained to my parents about it, I knew what they would say, which is, then make
Go play out.
yourself not bored. This is not up to me. Get off the couch, stop watching TV, go out and do something. You won't be bored anymore. And that's how my siblings and I learned not to be bored. That's how my
Yeah.
kids learned not to be bored, right? It's so much harder now because they can just get sucked into these devices. So while I think you can push kids a little too hard at times, that's certainly a possibility. We've all seen examples of that. You also have wisdom, which your child doesn't. You know how hard it is to become successful in the world. You
Mhm.
know what it takes to save for a mortgage, to get promoted at work when it's a highly competitive environment, how hard it is to find that first job often, how hard it is to get into a really good college. The children don't have that perspective, right?
Mhm.
So communicating that with them and certainly encouraging them to be excellent, there's very little downside to that, I think.
Yeah, makes sense. Wow. So, let's talk a little bit about the long term cost of this stagnation, underachievement, or hidden talents of these children not being highlighted or found. So, I want to pivot into the long term game from like high school, college, and then getting a job. Does this have a long term effect? Like, if you're not constantly challenging the child in school and they can just kind of become stagnant, but they're happy where they are. Does this have a long term effect?
I mean, I definitely think so. As I'm as I'm fond of saying, this country is a great place to be talented. It's not a great place to develop your talents. We just don't emphasize that in schools until you get to college, when all of a sudden all of our attitudes flip and it's be excellent, push yourself, accelerate, which is another weird quirk of the American system, right? In that when you're like younger, you get like lectured about, equity. Every student should have the same experiences. We don't want students to feel bad about themselves, etc. Except when you get to college, then everything changes instantly. Like that makes so little sense to me. There's probably a happy medium there, right? And stagnation, we did a study. This is one of the first studies I did. This was like 20, 25 years ago. We followed really bright late elementary students to middle school. And what we found was we called it academic survivability. So these were really bright students who just were bored in school. And through late elementary school, they found ways to quietly entertain themselves. They would bring books to class that weren't related to that class. They would be working on other sort of projects while the teacher was turned around. No teachers noticed it, which I thought was really interesting. These students became really good at keeping themselves engaged without the adult in the room realizing that they were doing something else. And almost every student that we followed, we started to see that change. And they just started staring off into space. They became much less engaged. They were just tired of teaching themselves in many ways. They were like tired of being the one who had to challenge themselves. They were just getting burnt out. Now we're talking 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. There's a lot of education left to go to be burnt out in 6th, 7th, or 8th grade, right? Just as you start growing up physically, emotionally, psychologically, intellectually, a lot of these students start to check out. And again, they are so good at camouflaging themselves, people just miss it. Again, universal screening helps with things like that. So my concern is that, yes, if you are part of a very supportive family that really emphasizes the value of education and you're not being challenged enough in school, your parents, your caregivers, your aunts and uncles, your grandparents are probably finding ways to challenge you outside of school.
Yeah.
I'm not that worried about that type of student. I want to make sure that they have more advanced opportunities throughout, but if we in the schools fail to provide them, I'm pretty sure the family is going to help us there. I'm worried about the larger group of students who have parents who don't really understand the system, who don't know that you can go in and talk to the teacher or principal, who have never had a family member who's had, say, accelerated math or accelerated writing or something like that. Not to say that those families have not had lots of talent in the past. It's just been ignored. They've been those hiding in plain sight kids. That's the student that I most worry about, like that, say, rural student who doesn't really have access to many advanced services, who may be part of a very tight-knit family, but one that also didn't have experience with these things. Maybe that's the student who could go off to a great engineering school and invent that agricultural technique that is going to massively increase crop yields, or, help address famine or droughts or something like that. If they never have the opportunity to do that, like, we all lose when that happens. The student certainly loses. The family, the community, again, doesn't benefit from all this talent sitting there. And so I think there's a personal cost to it. As I get older, I get more and more worried about the societal cost. Like, this country especially has a tremendous thirst for talent, right? Which is why it's ironic that our schools aren't really talent focused. And just an enormous thirst for talent. That's why we attract the world's best and brightest. And it's because we need talented people. And again, it's a great place to be talented. It's a low regulation environment. It's easy to start a business. It's probably the best access to capital in the world, financial capital, human capital. So it's great, but talent is the key. We need as much talent as we can to keep this American culture, this American economy going. If we don't start doing a better job of that, when I go to China, I see them doing a really good job in this area. Where's our talent going to come from? We need so much talent. And so I think that's the big picture cost that we have to keep in mind. You can never, as my father used to say, there's always a shortage of talented people. I would add there's always a shortage of talented, hardworking people. What are we doing to help students develop those skills and develop those talents so that they can go into the military, they can go directly into the workforce, they can go to college, knowing what it is to work hard, to know the excitement of like working on a challenging project and hitting a home run with it and having people go, wow, we can really build on this now. Like that is such an addictive feeling. I want every student who comes out of K-12 ed to have that, to know what that feels like. We're just not that close to that.
Yeah. Dr. Plucker, you spoke about that you're worried about the students who are getting missed in households where there's not such a big focus on education or they just don't know. So, for example, if a parent goes to a school and talks about universal screening or flexible grouping, and the school says we just don't have the budget, especially in an area which is not affluent, they're not getting a good funding. The school says we don't have good funding. Is this an excuse or their priorities are not in the right place? Like, I've never really understood that. Like, because most of the funding is always gone to students who are struggling or who need that extra help, but hardly any funding is gone to children who are brilliant. I mean, there is that twice exceptional thing, but then you have to really advocate for that.
Yeah, I mean, I think we could do an entire episode just on twice exceptionality. Like those parents have to fight doubly hard to make sure, right? It's very, very difficult. I have many, many friends with twice exceptional kids, and they just had to be in and around the school constantly advocating for their child. The system, again, just isn't really built for those students. I mean, I don't think it's an excuse. I think it's really important to say anyone in my experience who's working in education is doing it because they really care about kids.
They try their best.
Yeah, right. Like, the problem is almost none of them have any training in advanced education. So unless they went out and got it themselves, the vast majority of educators, and when I say educators, I mean everyone who works in schools, counselors, social workers, principals, assistant principals, custodial staff, like people just don't have the training. So they don't know that a lot of these interventions are very low or no cost. As one of my colleagues in North Carolina, Brenda Berg, likes to say, for lots of these options, it's the same number of teachers and the same number of students. Technically, it shouldn't cost more. If you move to flexible readiness grouping, same number of teachers, same number of students. You may have some upfront training costs, but those are not huge and they're fleeting, right? Like once you have people trained up, you're fine. Acceleration doesn't have to cost any more money. If you have a fourth grader who's ready for fifth grade math, put them in fifth grade math, you should be fine. And then, especially with technology now and students being digital natives, if you are in a very small school district, you don't have access to lots of these things, there's probably a local community college that your school can partner with. That's becoming increasingly common. That's very, very important. That's a very, very important option. But then you just have lots of online courses that are of very high quality. My daughter took, I think it was Algebra 2 in high school, completely online. And she said it was the most rigorous math course that she ever had. The quality of those courses has exponentially increased since she did that roughly a decade ago. So there actually are very low cost options out there for this. I think it's just one of those things where people don't have the training, they don't have the experience. A parent comes in and is asking for something extra, and it's just human nature to think extra means more money. It doesn't necessarily have to. It doesn't necessarily happen.
But can you explain to me what a twice exceptional student needs that is different from what they would get in a GT or accelerated class? Like, what is the difference?
Well, a twice exceptional student by definition has both learning needs and learning strengths, both of which are heightened enough to need extra support. In my experience, both as a teacher and just seeing what my friends go through as parents, because our schools are more deficit focused than strength focused, it's much easier to get your child's their struggle area. It's much easier to get that addressed than it is to get the talented piece addressed.
Yeah.
Part of it again is lack of, training, right? If you don't understand that lots of students with special education needs also have tremendous learning strengths, like they do not preclude each other. It's so easy to focus. And again, almost every school district has very well refined, very well thought out policies and procedures for special education. They almost certainly don't have things that are as well thought out for advanced education. So if you don't have training with advanced education, which direction are you going to lean in? Again, it's just human nature, right? So I just think that makes it really, really hard. I, as a former classroom teacher especially, always appreciated when parents came to me and really communicated about their child's needs. I wasn't defensive then. It just made it a discussion, and it made it sort of a group problem solving effort. It was, okay, how can we work together to help your student who has advanced learning needs? Awesome, right? So if you can, try not to make it confrontational.
Mm-hmm.
Make it part of okay, we see this with our child. We would like them to have a little more of this, that, and the other thing. Mm-hmm. How can we work together to do this? What can we do to help you? What are the options within this school district? We want to make this work for everybody. As the old saying goes, you attract a lot more flies with honey than vinegar. And even though parents knew me as a big advanced learning advocate, I would still have parents come to me and get mad at me with the first conversation. In some cases, I had to say, I don't even work with your child. I'm not sure why you're yelling at me. Let's just calm down, figure out a path forward where everyone can win.
It's happy. Yeah.
I'm making that sound easy. I know sometimes that's not easy, especially when you as a parent are very concerned about your child. But yeah, trying to make yourself a partner with the school tends to work well. Again, everyone is well-meaning on both sides of that conversation.
Yeah.
You just have to find that common ground.
I think some of it is also if you're such a concerned parent, then creating that culture of excellence and making your child read at home, study at home can also make a big difference. However, I worry that then it's like a double school, right? You're going to school, you're doing all the work, and then you're coming home and you're expecting the child to learn as well. And that's a difficult balance to strike, because that's when I think the parents get frustrated because they don't want the child to feel like they're doing school 2 times. You know what I mean?
I mean, one thing that parents can focus on, Prashanka, is if you're doing stuff at home,
Mm-hmm.
focusing more on that enrichment creativity piece, where they're taking things that they're learning, but then they're doing some interesting problem solving with it. They're working on projects that allow them to extend it.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't feel like more for the sake of more. It's
Mm-hmm.
more in the service of creating new things.
Mm-hmm.
Helping your child see that the science they're doing actually has really practical implications that are fun.
Well, yes.
So if they're learning about the environment, it's really easy to go out and buy a water quality testing kit. Go to the local stream and test some water together. What's the water in this stream like? Is it polluted? What sorts of chemicals are there? Stuff that they're learning about, but there's never enough time in school to do everything.
Yeah.
Sort of being the extension, so that they're thinking about how they can use the knowledge. And we know that really helps student creativity. So yes, so that they don't get to high school burnt out because they've been doing school twice all the way through. They've been doing school, and then you're helping them see the value of that information.
Like the practical bit.
Right. And also that's how you boredom proof kids, quite frankly. Just let them know that they are learning important things. And it's so important that you want to go outside with them and show them why some of this stuff really matters. If they're learning about Bernoulli's principle, go out and build a kite and go outside and fly a kite, right? Like, have some fun with this. This is stuff that parents, if they don't know it themselves, can easily Google now and go out and find this information, find cool activities. That's a way to sort of avoid that double school trap that has a lot of benefits for your child.
Wow. I want to end on a hopeful note and, I want to move past these labels and really see a child's potential. What do you think a flourishing student should look like in school? Is it good test scores? Is it a child being happy? What should a parent aim for?
Boy, that is that is a complicated question. That's a really good question.
I'm very happy that my child is happy, but then the next day I'm like, maybe I'm not challenging her enough. Like, I'm always confused. So I would really want to hear what you feel about this.
Well, I mean, I think every parent wants their child to be happy in the end, right?
Yes. Yeah.
That's very important. But as parents, we also know that happiness depends on lots of things. I think having your child be a fairly self-sufficient, even if it's doing their own laundry and things like that. Kids are smart. Washing machines are not that complicated. If they complain about dirty clothes, oh, I don't have that thing washed that I want. Hey, let me show you how adults solve this problem, right? Yeah. Just getting them to be as self-sufficient as possible, I think, is really helpful for that. A huge piece of that is you want them to be self-sufficient after they go out into the world. Yeah. In terms of their career, the types of friends that they make, that they're making very good choices of who they surround themselves with. And so I think people call it independence. I have no problem with independent children. I think I've got two myself, but they're also self-sufficient. Mm-hmm. Like, I know, like, my son is going overseas this year to do some language training. He's going to be a junior in college next year. Mm-hmm. He's going to a fairly dangerous part of the world.
Do you mind to ask where he's going?
Tajikistan, to learn Persian. He's with a State Department program. He's going to be surrounded by people who know what they're doing. This isn't the first time, though, that he's gone overseas by himself. So we know he has a good head on his shoulders. We know he knows how to hold on to his passport and protect himself from pickpockets. We know that if something goes wrong, he knows where he should look for help. He knows 3 a.m, probably not a good time to walk around a dark part of town that you don't know, right? Like, he can take care of himself. Is Mama Bear and Papa Bear 100% comfortable? Of course not. Of course not. He's our baby, right? Are we comfortable enough to let him go off and develop his talents with this really amazing, unique opportunity? Yeah, we are. I mean, we've given him sort of smaller chances to do this. They got bigger over time. He knows how to take care of himself. Or I should put it this way. If we were there, we wouldn't take care of him any better than he can take care of himself. That, to me, man, I think it's worked out pretty darn well. And his sister is very similar. So I think that like self-sufficiency piece is really, really important.
Wow. I love that. I love that example. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. I make it sound like I'm not nervous at all. Of course I'm nervous. It's right next to a war zone, for heaven's sakes. But I am sure he's going to be able to take care of himself as well as we could. So that's how he's going to learn. That's how he's going to move on. If we all got our kids to that point, I think you have to declare victory there a little bit. So
wow. Thank you for sharing that personal story. I think that's going to be the highlight of my episode today. Dr. Plucker, one last question. If there was one thing you would want to or hope to change in the education system, the public education system in the United States, what would that be? Or improve on?
Just one thing, huh? Here's my vision for what happens with schools. And I don't know how we get there. I have general ideas, but I'm not sure exactly how we do it. Is that every student comes to school, and when they walk in that door, the goal is to meet that student's needs. Those needs may be they're struggling with spelling a little bit, but at the same time, weirdly, they're also a fantastic writer. They just need help with spelling. And maybe they're a grade level above in math, but they need a little bit of help with reading. Science is okay, but it looks like there's a spark of interest with like biology or engineering or something. Every child, like every adult, is very multifaceted. I have to believe that there's a way for us to get to a universal education system where every facet of that child can be acknowledged and addressed as they move forward. We're not that close to that right now. I really think, though, that we're starting to figure it out. So I don't know what one thing I would fix, but anything that gets us closer to that ideal where we start seeing students as everything they are and to really promote those strengths as much as we address, I don't even want to call them weaknesses, just areas that they're struggling in, areas that they have to work on. When those are all equally valued, I think we really value the child comprehensively. That's a world that I want to live in. That's a school system that I want to support. I think we're slowly inching toward that. We aren't there, and I want us to go faster. So I hope that's optimistic enough.
It is, yeah. I mean, one thing, if I was able to change things, and probably you don't want to know this, but I'm just going to say this for the audience, is I really wish our children were taught how to manage finances and also manage people. For me, like if I was taught that in school, my life would be 80% better, in my opinion. I feel these are two very big areas in life that are overlooked, and I just assume that they'll figure it out. But very important, like elementary school start on like how to manage money, how to manage different kind of people. So yeah.
You know, I can give you a very practical example of this,
Yeah.
especially when I teach undergrads.
Yeah.
If they don't know personal finance by then, I end up teaching it to them because I hear them talking about, I lost my credit card last night, like before class starts. Or, hey, you know, I just got my third credit card. And I'm like, no, do you know what that does to your credit score? Like, and just like so much of personal finance escapes all of us. I mean, I learned it in my mid to late 20s.
I still don't know.
It just totally resonated when you said, like, my life would have been so much easier if I had known this when I was 15 or 16. It would have made such a big difference. So yes, I'm a strong believer in that personal finance. Like, don't leave it up to me on the margins of class to help your undergrad understand that. They should know it before they go off to college. Again, that's part of adult self-sufficiency, right? Like to understand how finance and money works. Gosh, it's so important. And yet,
oh my God,
we do almost no instruction with that whatsoever. It's a huge area we have.
And I think it's like, it's a systemic change. Like it's not just that you need only the twice exceptional or the struggling. Everybody needs to know this.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So for me, that is like number one thing. Me and my husband, we always have this conversation. Like if there's one thing we want a kid to take with them when they're leaving this house at 18 is know how to handle your finances and know how to deal with people.
Personal finance is so critically important to being independent. I mean, how can you ever be independent without that knowledge, right? Because you're going to be making so many mistakes. You're going to have to fall back on others, and some of those options are not great, right? So that's so important. I 100% endorse.
Yeah.
Make sure your kids know that stuff.
We're trying. But thank you so much once again. This has been eye-opening in some ways and also very encouraging. So thank you again for this wonderful podcast. If you enjoyed this podcast, please like, subscribe, and share. I will be putting Dr. Plucker's information in the description section below. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to him. And until then, this is Rishanka Jones signing off.